Yeah, that's the big thing. I think that they did it purposely so they can eclipse everything. Good morning, everyone. I'm very honored to be standing here with two champions for America's consumers and America's taxpayers. Our distinguished ranking member in the House Financial Services Committee, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, and Senator Elizabeth Warren, who is the founder of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, financial services institutions. I mean, in every way, she has been a protector of the American people. 8 years ago, unchecked recklessness on Wall Street ignited a financial meltdown that devastated families across the country. Democrats took bold action and passed the Dodd-Frank bill. We're so proud of Senator Dodd and Chairman Frank for what they did. The strongest set of consumer financial protections in history. But today, House Republicans are once again trying to destroy those protections. Last month, Republicans passed their what we call the Wrong Choice Act, the repeal of Dodd-Frank, a giveaway to the financial industry at the expense of hardworking families. Republicans are waging war on the Consumer Bureau, a bureau that has returned nearly $12 billion to nearly 29 million people in our country, wronged Americans, many of them seniors, veterans, and members of the armed services. And now Republicans are stacking the deck even further against American families seeking to deny the fundamental rights to obtain justice in court. Forcing consumers into arbitration, indeed forced arbitration, gives financial services providers a free pass to get away with abuse. It denies veterans, service members, and seniors and others justice against predatory financial marketplace practices. And it sadly reflects a Republican Party that works relentlessly to empower Wall Street and to rig the system against consumers. We take a pledge each day, liberty and justice for all. And like the Magna Carta, over 800 years old, the Magna Carta pledge says, to no one will we refuse or delay right or justice. And yet, that's exactly what they want to do today. All the American people deserve a better deal than what they're getting from Republicans in Congress. Democrats are going to fight back. We will fight this resolution, protect hardworking Americans. We're going to fight to put leverage. Who has the leverage? Put leverage back into the hands of the American people. And now it is my privilege to yield the floor to the distinguished ranking member of the Financial Services Committee in the House of Representatives, a defender of Dodd-Frank, a protector of the rights and opportunities for America's consumers and taxpayers. Congresswoman Maxine Waters.
Thank you so very much, Leader Pelosi. I am so delighted to be here with Nancy Pelosi, the first woman speaker of the United States Congress in the history of the United States Congress, and Senator Elizabeth Warren, who is a leader that helped to create the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and is the leader who is constantly speaking out on behalf of consumers and helping people to understand what we can do to give consumers a fair chance in our society to have a good quality of life and not to be ripped off by those who are in power and in high places. And so I'm here this morning to call out yet another shameful Republican effort to take away important consumer protections. Earlier this month, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau issued a final rule banning forced arbitration clauses in contracts for consumer financial products. The rule ensures that consumers are not required to sign away their legal rights in order to open a bank account, obtain a credit card, finance a car, or obtain a private student loan. The rule is very important because consumers who are cheated by financial institutions and who are then forced into closed-door arbitration receive less compensation than they would have received if they had had the opportunity, perhaps, to have their day in court. Forced arbitration benefits large corporations and Wall Street banks to the detriment of consumers. For example, Wells Fargo continues to use forced arbitration to prevent consumers from pursuing class action lawsuits against the bank for opening millions of fraudulent accounts using their personal information. The joint resolution the Republicans have put forth uses the Congressional Review Act to senselessly repeal the Consumer Bureau's important new role. This is outrageous and unacceptable. Unfortunately, it is just the latest in a wave of Republican attacks on financial regulation and consumer protection. In June, House Republicans passed what I call the Wrong Choice Act, a bill to dismantle Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act and gut the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Now, they're moving to snatch away legal rights from consumers. I and other Democrats are determined to continue this fight against this harmful efforts, all of these efforts, and to stand up for Main Street. Thank you very much. And of course, as I mentioned, Senator Warren.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, we're involved in a lot of tough fights in Washington right now. But when it really gets tough and we got to get out there and fight on behalf of American families, there is no one I would rather go into battle with shoulder to shoulder than Leader Pelosi and Ranking Member of House Financial Services, Maxine Waters. These two women have been incredible and against tough odds have been there to stand up for families over and over and over. So I just want to make a couple of brief remarks about what's going on here. And the first is, I want you to think about the fact that last Friday was the 6th birthday of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Yay! I always do this when I mention it. It's finally up, it's running. Here's this little agency. And the question is, why has it drawn so much fire from the Republicans in Washington? Why is it that the banks and the financial services industry is after it day after day after day? And I'll tell you the answer. It's because it works. It works. That little agency has forced the biggest financial institutions in this country to return nearly $12 billion directly to families they cheated. It's handled more than 1 million complaints. It's done tough oversight and enforcement, and it's come out with regulations that piece at a time are beginning to level the playing field between giant financial institutions on one hand and American families on the other. And because it is working, the Republicans want to find every way they can to bring it down. Right now, we're here on an emergency basis because the Republicans have seen the latest rule that's come out of the consumer agency, and they are determined to act on behalf of the big financial institutions and get rid of this new regulation. Now, what does this new regulation do? It's an arbitration clause. The consumer agency has said effectively that no longer can companies slip just a little bit of fine print down deep somewhere in the contract you sign that says that if something goes wrong, you must go to arbitration to get it resolved. Well, let me tell you why the consumer agency is opposed to that and has said, can't do that anymore, guys. It's because that clause should have a big red flashing light around it that says you're about to sign a contract here, but if that credit card company, if that private student lender cheats you, there's probably not much you can do about it because you sure can't go to court. And I want you to think about that for a minute. Somebody cheats you for a few $100s. Can you really afford to go to arbitration? Somebody cheats you for just $30, just adds an extra fee on. Can you really afford to go to arbitration here? So the law up until now, the law up until we ended up with these clauses was basically whenever consumers get cheated in the same way. A whole lot of people get hurt in basically the same way. They dinged all of you with a $30 clause. They dinged all of you with a $150 penalty fee. They raised your interest rates in ways that were not in the contract. What would happen before is all of you could join together and go to court together, because the courts had recognized that what it took for access to the court is that you could bring a lot of claims together and then you had some balance. So if you were up against a big financial institution, but several hundred or several thousand consumers had been cheated, there was a chance to get some redress. You had your day in court, but not if there's an arbitration clause in place. So when there's a forced arbitration clause in place, nobody gets to do the class action, which means effectively nobody ever gets into court. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has said in these credit contracts, you just got to stop this. If you're going to cheat people, there's going to be some accountability. That's what this provision is all about. And that's why we're here today, is to defend the consumer agency. It did a long study of this procedure. We said in the original Dodd-Frank enabling legislation, take a look at arbitration. And if you think American consumers are getting hurt by these clauses, then go forward. Give us a rule to deal with arbitration. Give us a rule that will let American consumers get back into court. So now we come to that moment when everybody in Washington, everybody in Congress, House and Senate has to pick, whose side are you on? Are you on the side of the consumers, the side of the consumer groups, the side of the faith groups, the side of the veterans groups, the side of the civil rights groups, the side of the people? Or are you on the side of the giant financial institutions? The Republicans are advancing this bill because they are on the side of the giant financial institutions. We are here to defend the side of the people. Leader?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yours.
Thank you.
I get a little worked up about this. I do.
Any questions? Here we go.
Go ahead.
The vote on the arbitration CRA, do you think that should be a litmus test for the rest of the CFPB's rulemaking agenda, namely the small dollar rule, which is up next? Would you like to see that rule come out regardless of what happens on the vote?
Go ahead.
Maxine, you're
Maxine?
committee.
I didn't really hear everything that he said. Would you repeat it, please?
The CRA on the arbitration rule, the next rule in the CFPB's rulemaking agenda is a small dollar loan rule. And I'm wondering if this vote on the arbitration rule should be a litmus test for the small dollar loan rule, or would you like to see Director Cordray to release a small dollar rule regardless?
No, let me just focus on mandatory arbitration and how important that is. And you heard from Senator Warren talking about the fact that not only have they come basically at the last minute with this rule, after all of the work that has been done by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and Mr. Cordray to do what we instructed them to do when we did the Dodd-Frank reforms. And this is a litmus test on Republicans. This is a litmus test that says, as she said, who are you with? Are you with the consumers? Are you with us? And so this is very clear, and people can determine, Republicans and Democrats alike, who they're going to stand with. It stands on its own for them to be determined whether or not they're going to protect the consumer.
If I just may add to that in the following way, because you're asking about a couple different things there. Let's enlarge the whole issue. Again, as I said, who has the leverage? If the banks and the financial institutions know that the consumer can engage in a class action suit, they might alter their behavior. But if they know they're at the consumer is at the mercy of the banks because of forced arbitration, the consumer doesn't stand a chance. It doesn't stand a chance. So whatever the provision you might bring up, it's always about if you are forced into arbitration and you can't engage in a class action suit, you have surrendered your rights. And that just gives them a clear path to exploitation. And so whatever the rule happens to be, I hope that the director will come forth withdraw and not let this stand in its way. Because what the Republicans will vote for on the floor is no litmus test of what is right for the American people.
You know, I would just add one point, and that is what makes the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau strong is it doesn't play politics. It has exactly one group that it watches out for, and that's American consumers. And it does it straight down the line, make sure that American consumers don't get cheated, don't get tricked, don't get trapped. That's its job, and it carries out that job every single day. And that's why we're here to defend it.
Yes, sir.
Leader Pelosi or any of you, are the Republicans successfully using the Congressional Review Act to render the CFPB?
Well, they're using the. Oh, excuse me.
Did you anticipate, since you were here in 1996 when it became law?
Yes.
It was David McIntosh's idea.
Right.
Did you anticipate that this Congressional Review Act would be used? Did you have concerns about it? Did you think it would be
Yes.
used in this way?
Yes, we thought it would be a vehicle, and as the Republicans have used it, they've been very clear in their agenda, whether it's undermining the environment, whether in every category you can name, they have narrowed the protections for the American people, whether it's the air they breathe or their credit card account. And no, it was a clear path for them, because why would you have a bill that would say not only are we repealing this regulation, we're saying you cannot change it. You cannot change it. It would take a new Congress to pass a new law, but the agency cannot come back and say, well, if you objected to this, let's split the difference, or let's recognize your concern. It was destructive from the start. It was clear from the start they were removing all protections. That was what its purpose was. That's what its purpose continues to be.
Let me just say that one of the arguments that the Republicans have been effective in advancing is overregulation. And oftentimes I'm confronted with questions about when are you guys are going to do something about the overregulation of the community banks? When are you guys going to deal with the fact that you should be concerned about the fact that the economy does not work as well because of too many regulations? And it seems that too many folks have bought into that. And I'm oftentimes asked this over and over again by the media. And so I think that the Congressional Review Act certainly is used for the purpose of deregulation. And we have to be very concerned about that, because what you see here is an example of that. Dodd-Frank is the best thing that ever happened to consumers. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is the only agency that's really looking out for the welfare of consumers. And prior to it, when we took the look at the responsibilities of all those agencies that were supposed to be concerned about consumer protection, it wasn't there. And that's why Senator Warren was so very, very insightful and very, very influential and caused us to have this Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And so, yes, I believe that the Congressional Review Act is being used by them to deregulate.
Well, I would just make a little distinction in that regard. They use the word deregulate, but what they are doing is removing protections.
That's right.
Protections for clean air, protections for our children. I can show you pictures over and over again of families, children, seniors, consumers, men and women in uniform who have been ripped off by this the CRAs.
Yes.
In the name of deregulation, but what it is laissez-faire.
Senator Warren, when you were designing and creating the CFPB, did you think about the potential that using the Congressional Review Act, Congress could simply undercut it or render it neuter it or whatever?
No, I did not. I thought when we built the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau out there for American families, that both Democrats and Republicans would stand up, and that the idea that when the consumer agency would try to put in place the regulations to make the economy safe again, to keep people from getting cheated, that the Republicans would say we want to roll those regulations back never crossed my mind. This agency was not an agency that was born of somebody sat around and said, how can we create more regulation? This agency was born of a financial crisis that started one lousy, cheating mortgage at a time. And it was put in place not because there weren't laws already in Congress, but as Congresswoman Waters said, because they were scattered among a bunch of different agencies who wouldn't pick the law up and use it. And so this agency was the agency where those laws were gathered in one place and said the laws are going to be there, you're going to develop the expertise, you're going to have the resources, and then you're going to be responsible for answering to the American people to make sure that giant financial institutions do not get to cheat their customers again, build their profit models around tricking people, and take down not just millions of families, but take down this whole economy. That's why we built the consumer agency to begin with. And the truth is, I never thought it was going to be a partisan issue. I thought after the financial crash of 2008 that all of America had seen enough and said, from now on, we just want a level playing field. We just want people to be able to get a mortgage, to be able to get a credit card, to be able to take out a private student loan without getting cheated. That's what this agency is about. And the fact that the Republicans want to stand up and say, let's get rid of those rules and let's get rid of that agency. Let's find a way to leash up that watchdog is fundamentally wrong. And it goes right back to this question. Whose side do you stand on? Democrats stand with the people. Republicans stand with the big banks.
Now you can see why House Democrats were so proud that we had the initiative in the legislation to establish a commission that would review the actions of Wall Street, and who chaired that commission, as it turns out, but then not senator yet, but Elizabeth Warren. So she has been present at the birth of all of this, watched it very carefully, and stands ready to join with others and lead the way to protect, not remove protections, but to protect the consumer, the taxpayer, our veterans, our men and women in uniform, whom they exploit shamelessly. It's really very, very sad. But we will, again, make the fight and make it very visible, as you can see. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't go with the real notes.
That's okay. You were fabulous.
Nobody I'd rather go into battle with.